Hello and welcome to Morgan Latif Presents. I'm Oliver Morgan, co-founder and director of Morgan Latif and your host. And in this episode, I'm joined by Carolyn Lum, head of continuous improvement at Philips. Carolyn talks us through her lean transformation journey at Philips, how when she joined, they decided to focus initially on 3 lean tools of daily management, problem solving, and Kaizen. And then a little bit about what she looks for in those lean leaders to drive the continuous improvement journey with her. I hope you enjoy. Carolyn, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Really glad to be here today.
So just to start with, I'd be really interested if you could just tell us a little bit more about Philips, why you decided to join and where they were at in their lean transformation journey when you joined them.
Yeah, very good. So I started with Philips exactly 6 years ago in October of 2014. What excited me about Philips was the transformation of the company from really an industrial conglomerate making many things that I think some of you have in your house, like maybe a TV or an air fryer, and the vision and the strategy of the company to move more towards health tech technology. This was a key reason why I decided to join Philips. The vision of the company to really be an important player in all of our lives to improve healthcare for everyone around the world is inspiring. It's a big challenge. And as we all are going through the COVID crisis in 2020, we really do understand as a Philips company how our strategy has helped during the crisis and how it will continue to help in the future of fighting this crisis and potentially any new ones in the future. When I came to Philips in 2014, we were in a lean transformation journey. But what I found was that people were doing lean in pockets. And because Philips is a huge company, a lot of people came from many companies to Philips. And of course, everybody wants to do things their way. So when I came, I found a lot of people doing lean, but lean in different ways. I think the important thing that we've done in the last 6 years was try to create a common language across the company. So we don't discuss which lean methodology we're going to use. Rather, we align around one lean methodology and use that as a common language to drive change and continuous improvement. I think the other thing that's been extremely important is the cultural change of our leadership. Maybe we'll get to that a little bit later, but I think this has also been a key change in the last few years of really changing the way our leadership thinks about lean, not as a tool set that people use, rather something that they also as leaders have to use.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd definitely be interested after we've talked a little bit more about the Philips journey to talk about your view on what is really important in leadership in this aspect. When you joined, how you said that there were different pockets of lean going on. What steps do you take to evaluate the current state when you go into such a big, complex organization?
Yeah, and any good leader comes to a company and observes for a while before they make any drastic change. So I spent a lot of time at the beginning, maybe the first 3 months, going around the world when it was possible then to see the different sites and to see the way people were driving lean. And I think to me, I think I'm rather simple in that I like to pick out a few things that I'd like to start with. So when I came to Philips, they had an extensive lean toolkit, probably the most extensive lean toolkit that I've ever seen. But I think sometimes when you're confronted with a variety, it's confusing. So looking at what people were doing and how their selection of tools was a key factor in the first 3 to 6 months. And I remember speaking with our CEO for the very first time when he asked me, "So you've been here now for 6 months, what do you think we need to do?" And my thought there was we need to focus on the vital few. And we picked out some key tools that I thought would form the basis of creating this culture. And those 3 tools were daily management, problem solving, and Kaizen events. So building some basic capability across the whole enterprise. So we aligned around those 3 things. And I would say in the last 6 years, we really improved our capability and the quality with which we use these tools. So that was for me the key thing, picking out 3 things we wanted to do well, making sure that people were armed and ready and capable and trained to do these 3 things well, and then exercising, exercise, exercise, exercise. And I would say 6 years later, we are really very good at these three basic tools. And our plans for the future are to expand our toolkit to what we call the 8 basic core tools.
I can understand that sometimes the complexity can cause confusion. I'd be quite interested, how did you decide that these were the 3 tools that you'd start off with initially?
Well, when we talk about tools, and if you think about your home, there's 3 basic tools that everybody have, I think. And I'm not a big hand worker, so I don't have this huge toolkit. But I think everybody in their house has a screwdriver, a hammer, and a pair of pliers. And I equate these 3 tools to those 3 basic tools because most problems can be solved with basic tools. So you don't need a special tile cutting machine in every household unless you're going to redo your bathroom, which most of us don't do on our own. But you do need the 3 basic tools. So I think that was my reasoning for picking out those 3. Also, if I look back at, say, the over 30 years that I've been doing lean, I find that enterprises who do these 3 things well as a basis build upon that. So, and you can't really use the higher tools well unless you've picked out these 3. For example, problem solving. If you apply lean to something that's not a problem, you're probably investing some resources into something that is not the best use of your time. I think using problem solving to understand what problem I'm trying to solve and saying, do I really want to spend the time to solve this problem, helps you set the tone for the rest of your agenda. That's one reason why we picked out these 3 tools.
Right. Okay. So if you have that daily management in place, you at least have what good looks like and
Exactly.
can then solve problems against that.
We say if you do daily management well, you know if you're winning or losing. And you don't necessarily need to spend too much time on something that you're winning at. You really do need to focus on the things that are red, the things that are giving you problems. So daily management helps you find the red. Problem solving helps you understand why is it red and what things do I need to do. And then the Kaizen event helps you focus in on what you've identified in the problem solving, and hopefully you make it better.
Yeah,
and for me,
absolutely.
that's a good recipe over the last 30 years.
When you started, were there particular regions or functions or let's say hotspots where you initially focused?
Yeah, that's a good one. So we applied some good problem solving at the enterprise level to understand where we needed to focus on. And of course, we looked at the company financials and we tried to understand which areas of the company needed more help than others. And I wouldn't say we picked a geographic region per se. We picked a part of our business that was maybe more global to focus on. So, we didn't try to do everything at once. And we use good problem solving skills to understand the highest bar on the Pareto to help us focus where we were. And at the time when I joined 6 years ago, we really wanted to put some more rigor into our sales processes. And this is not typically a place where you start. But for us 6 years ago, this was a place where I thought we needed more help. So you might traditionally start in manufacturing, but I would say 6 years ago, we focused more on the commercial part of our organization. And that's where we put a lot of our resources in at the very beginning.
It's where you often find a little bit more resistance as well, isn't it? In terms of salespeople saying we don't follow a process, it's about the relationship. So
and we're very creative people, and standard work is not something that you hear a lot in the sales organization. But if you look at a company's financial, most people are spending more money on their commercial organization these days than in manufacturing. So you really want to focus on where you can get the biggest bang for the buck. And for us 6 years ago, that's where we decided to start.
I think it seems really valuable as well that you tie in everything to the business goals, and you seem really focused that the business transformation is enabling the business to achieve that. And I think sometimes that's also lost in organizations where you just end up doing lean for lean's sake. So that's valuable as well.
Yeah. I think that comes a lot from, my background is really looking at integrations of companies. And when you integrate a company into your existing company, you take a look at their financial performance to understand where is it that they could get started when you buy them. And that I do now inside of Philips, where before when I worked at the company I previously worked at, I spent a lot of time integrating companies. So taking that approach to look at the financial, understand where the business need more help, and to act like a business partner rather than a lean consultant. So everyone in my team looks at the business as much as they look at what they're doing on lean. And I would say these days probably more. Is I want them to be an integral part of the organization they work at, not some part of the company that does lean and then we look at them as a separate part. All of the teams that I have globally are integrated into the business or the commercial organization that they work with.
I can imagine that's really valuable. You also mentioned the CEO briefly, and I know from our discussions that having him brought in was extremely valuable. And I speak to many people that say without that top management support, it's an uphill struggle.
Absolutely.
Could you give a bit of an insight into how you managed to get him so involved and even really driving then the lean transformation at Philips?
In our case, I think it was a relatively easy task because Franz, our CEO, had joined Philips in 2011 as CEO, and he wanted to put us on an operational excellence journey. So he had this vision in his mind starting already when he came. I think the key for us in 2014 was to focus on the vital few. Where do we use the lean tools? And also the cultural shift in the mindset of our leadership. And this also came with strong sponsorship from his side. In the last few years, we've also spent a lot of time, effort, and resources in pointing out to leadership that this cultural change of driving lean through leadership must come from the top. And I know a lot of companies where the CEO wants to do this, but somehow we don't get the next layers to buy in. And in the last 4 years, starting around 2017, we spent time with executives. For example, we spent 5 days executive lean leadership with top 1,000 people in the company. A very intense training, starts early in the morning, goes late at night, 5 full days, talking about the lean journey, the lean toolkit, and what is the role of leadership. And this was a key for us because it's good if the CEO wants to do it, but you have to go through the next layers. And I sometimes think that people don't spend enough time at the next layers to drive this because leaders have to role model the behavior. They have to show people how important it is to use lean to do the things they need to do. And so I think from that perspective, he had a very strong vision from the very beginning. It made parts of my job very easy. Not to say that the journey was easy, but I definitely think he was there to help me with some of the roadblocks that we encountered.
And were there particular areas of resistance or challenges that you faced along the journey so far?
I think there's always a group of the population that will not be your early adopters. So when we teach lean leadership, there's a video that we show. It's the shirtless guy. I don't know if you've seen it. Maybe we can include the link, but it talks about finding your early adopters. And I think in any big change like this, you have to find the early adapters, the people who you can work with to show your success, who also create the influence to the rest of the organization. So I always encourage my people to find the early adapter, to work with the early adapter, and to make that person a rock star, so that everyone starts to understand or look at the rock star and say, I want to be more like that. So what did you do to get there? And I think using this influencing tactic has helped us quite a bit. And there were plenty of early adapters to find at Philips, and there are still very many. And they helped us pull along the people who might not have been the first early adapters. But in any transformation, there are going to be people who are early adapters. There are going to be people in the middle who follow. And there's always going to be a small portion of the population who might not ever make the change. But I do think we've passed the hump and we're through the majority, and there's not so many people that are not jumping up and dancing with us like the video.
That's good. And I can imagine then that choosing your early adapters is a really important thing to get right to ensure success. Are there any things that you looked for outside of just an interest in lean that helped you make that decision?
I think early adapters are relatively easy to pick out in a crowd. They tend to be the people who are open to new ideas, who aren't immediate naysayers, and they they seem to want to try and test the hypothesis. And so when I came to Philips in 2014, I was very fortunate to have been introduced to an early adapter just by chance, as a matter of luck, because we had just purchased a new company and I was supporting the integration. And the executive who was driving this integration was extremely open to new ways of working and allowed us to experiment. And maybe not the typical Philips way of driving lean. And through this experimentation, we saw many successes very early on that we typically hadn't seen with the previous approach of lean. So we were very lucky to find the first early adapter. And once you get some success, the other early adapters come out naturally because they see the success and they are very curious about how did you get there so quickly. I think through a series of early successes, we drew out other early adapters and then more and more people come out and then suddenly you have a lot of people dancing with you and doing lean. So I think in that respect, we were quite fortunate.
You mentioned as well, and the early adapters hold these leadership positions, and I was quite interested to get your thoughts on effective lean leadership and what that looks like outside of the technical skills. For
Yeah,
you, for you, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, to me, an effective lean leader is someone who demonstrates servant leadership. A person who understands the tools, and maybe they're not the best people using all of the lean toolkits, but they understand, like when you go into a home improvement store, they understand when you come into the store, you have a problem and you need to solve it. They can coach you a little bit on which tool you might want to use. Because when you go to a home improvement store, not everybody knows how to use every tool perfectly. So I think this servant leadership of coaching people to drive problem solving, to ask for coaching, and to be able to deliver coaching is very important. I think also letting people do trial and error. So helping them use the lean tools to hypothesis test to see how they can close the gap without always telling them you know better than they do. So to us, servant leadership is the key element of executive leadership support, not trying to do it all yourself, rather doing lean through the teams that you manage. And I think you have to know how lean works, because I always use the analogy, if you have a child and they're going to football and they're on a football team, you would hope that the football coach knows how to play football, because they're probably not a very effective coach to your child if they've never played football themselves. And I think that's a good analogy to use in lean. If your leaders don't know anything about lean, they can't really coach you. This is why we spent so much time with these executives in the 5-day executive lean leadership.
I can imagine, and it's actually often one of the skills or characteristics that's a little bit more difficult to identify in an interview process, for example. But when you are looking to select people for your team, what kind of signs do you look for that shows they might have that servant leadership mentality or approach?
Just servant leadership, I think, so to me, when I interview my team, servant leadership is important. The way they talk about driving, the way they've driven change historically in their career. So when they talk more about what they've done versus what their team has done, this is also a sign. I also look for strong co-responsibility skills. So so sometimes people talk about lean as being consultants, and I think I look at our team as being co-responsible. So I've mentioned that earlier. I want our people not to feel like they're the lead coach and the coach can kind of leave if the game is not, if they're not winning. I want them to feel like they have skin in the game. So they're just as responsible as the people running the business. This is why it's important for them to understand the financial status of where they're working on, because I don't want them to suggest to work on something that is not the biggest pain for the business. I think co-responsibility, the ability to work hand in hand with the team and not just be a consultant, and also the servant leadership through how have they done things in the past are key things I look for when I interview for people on my team.
Thank you for that. It's really valuable. Does it change across different cultures? Because obviously Philips is a global enterprise, is present in most countries. So how have you found that?
It's a very good question. There are always cultural differences that I think must be respected. But I find that with lean, because lean uses so much common sense, doing daily management to understand if you're winning or losing, doing problem solving if you understand that you're losing, and applying Kaizen to that pain point, I don't find that that recipe needs to be changed anywhere in the world. I think if you start with that sequence of events, it seems to work everywhere. Of course, there are some cultural differences with how people look at seniority and the type of dialogue that people have, but the basic recipe of using the tools and essentially that sequence seems to work pretty much the same everywhere in the world. And we have people everywhere in the world, and I can tell you we follow the same recipe.
Right. And thinking to the future, because you mentioned you've been in Philips for 6 years now, and you did mention about the offsite where you had the top 1,000 leaders come and be trained in lean leadership. I can imagine that positions in leadership change, and it'd be interesting to understand, how do you maintain momentum once you've been through that process? Is that a challenge you've faced?
It's a good question, and you're right. There's always a lot of fluctuation and change in leadership. So we monitor this fluctuation, and we do also monitor the training that goes along with that. So we are right now in the process of updating the status of which executives are new and who needs to be trained in the future, who haven't been here during the period that we did it. So this training we will constantly update and keep new leaders trained. And I think it's also important to just good daily management on that. And we provide updates to our executive committee on lean education and lean certification on a regular basis.
I can imagine it's also hard when a lot of the lean implementation that I've witnessed is actually done at Gemba. And having coronavirus, is that also a challenge you face, having to continue that momentum remotely?
Yeah, we found though that the people who in the past years have built a strong culture and system of daily management have found Corona to be no problem, because it's this. I was speaking to someone last week, and she runs our Nordic organization. She talked about her daily management. She said, "Yep, every Friday we go through everything and do our daily management, and we can see what's red, what's great, where do we spend our time." I think if they hadn't spent that time, doing that over the past couple of years, they would have had a harder time with Corona.
Yeah, I can imagine having the systems and structures and processes in place. Yeah.
So sure. I think a lot of our leaders who had it and have it still are very appreciative that they spent the time in the last couple of years to build it.
Yeah. So Carolyn, thank you so much for your time and insights into the lean transformation journey at Philips and some of the opportunities to come. I'd be interested just to get a brief summary, a couple of key takeaways from the discussion, if people should remember anything from our talk.
Well, thanks again for the opportunity. So I think in summary, the very important things that I would ask you to consider in your lean journey is make sure you have a very clear strategy where you want to go. And also, as we mentioned, important to have the CEO support along with the top leadership of your company. So you're going to have to spend a lot of time helping them along the lean journey. And I think to me, it's always critical to build a world-class team. So make sure you understand what you're looking for, define the criteria of the team members that you need, and to hunt effectively throughout the world to make sure you get those people on your team. And I think once you have the right team, the rest of it seems to go pretty automatic. And I would have to say it's made my life a lot easier in the last 6 years. So very good luck to all of you on your lean journey.
Perfect. Thanks a lot again. Take care.
You're welcome.